Good afternoon, fellow patriots. This is Matt Shea, and welcome to Patriot Radio, broadcasting live from deep inside the heart of the future Liberty State. Sponsored once again by On Fire Ministries, in the legacy of Dr. Stan Monteith, bringing you the story behind the story and the news behind the news, where it's not about right or left, it's about right and wrong. It's about our hope not being in man, but in Jesus Christ. About not ending in prayer, but moving to action. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Father, deliver us from the evil one.
Welcome to Patriot Radio.
Good afternoon, fellow patriots. This is Matt Shea, and today on Patriot Radio, Russia and the peace deal over Ukraine back on track. It sounds like it after Trump's conversation with Putin today. Also, the fragile Gaza peace appears to be falling apart. And here on the national front, history is made today as two people are indicted on federal charges for being part of Antifa. And along with them, but on a separate case, John Bolton was indicted today as well. Also, our guest is going to be Mark Sutherland, talking about the peace in the Middle East and what's going on in Britain, which is just becoming a continual cautionary tale for us here in the United States of America. Here at Patriot Radio, we want you to have all the information before everyone else that you need for you and your family to be prepared for the times that are ahead and the times that are already upon us. So follow us on patriotradio.us/Telegram. Real-time intelligence analysis and breaking news. Also, we need prayer during this time, especially with the upcoming weekend and the No Kings protest. patriotradio.us/prayer. Love to join you in that. We have a team standing by as we speak. And the interesting thing that has happened is that the United States is beginning to learn that Middle East peace agreements really don't mean anything to those who are complying with Sharia. In fact, as we talked about on the last show, the chants in Gaza were Hudaybiyah, Hudaybiyah. In other words, talking about the Treaty of Hudaybiyah that Muhammad struck so that he could build his forces, regroup, rearm, re-equip, and then strike out and kill his foes and conquer his foes. The fact they're chanting that in Gaza means they don't intend to have a long-lasting peace. And in addition to that, Hamas's leader saying that the countdown has begun. The next massacre of the Jews also does not bode well for the peace there in the Middle East. And that's why, in our wisdom from the Word today, we need to understand the idea, the spiritual principle behind yoking. 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14, coming to us from the New King James Version. Do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship has righteousness with lawlessness, and what communion has light with darkness? False allegiances, false alliances always seem to blow up in our faces. And George Washington cautioned us in America against entangling alliances overseas, that our businesses and our missionaries should be the voice of the United States, and really the tip of the spear for diplomacy overseas as well. What we've run into in the Middle East is that some people will say whatever to get some money for a short period of time, but it's always interesting that the agreements are never over 10 years in length. Why is that? Because that was the length of time for the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. The Middle East is not interested in peace, at least among certain Islamic factions. And so President Trump is trying to navigate something that I think in the back of his mind and deep in his heart he already knows is going to require overwhelming force to make happen. And I think he spoke the other day regarding that when he said that he was going to order 20 more of the B-2 bombers because they work so well. I think that was a warning shot, as it were, for the entire Middle East to get in line. But the fact of the matter is that during this time, the dragon, Islam, is always going to be attacking the woman, Israel, and always going to be attacking the church of Jesus Christ. And it's our job to stand in the evil day and not give 1 inch, but always be prepared to evangelize those who God is already working on and touching. And it's a hard thing to say for Christians. On one hand, you're stopping them from doing violence. And sometimes you have to do that with overwhelming force. You have to stop people from perpetrating evil. And the government of the United States of America, that's actually its job to promote good and punish evil. But on the other hand, as Christians, we need to be able, willing to evangelize at a moment's notice anyone who is reaching out for the truth. And that brings us to the globalist front.
The future is built by us. We have the means to make progress on the global agenda.
Pavel Durov, the founder of Telegram, warning us regarding time running out to stop the tyranny on the internet and to save the free internet. EU lawmakers have sought to introduce chat control, while the UK and Australia are on track for digital ID systems. And Pavel Durov says these dystopian measures need to be stopped. We shouldn't be funding them as taxpayers either. It's going to give rise to some very interesting conversations in the very near future. Also, Trump-era tech elites at the Omniwar Symposium have cemented the study group on technology and power, and the international group of academics is the first to expose technocracy as a global threat. The digital attack on humanity, because these tech elites are building a global digital control grid. The answer is no, and the answer is we should fight it also at the local level, because the great Achilles heel of the globalists is they always have to rely on the local level to implement their plans, either through corruption or coercion. And if you have a strong enough leadership at the local level, county by county, you can say no and stop the digital technocracy and the digital tyranny. Because this is enslavement not only of the mind, but also of the emotions, the will, the identity of people. And that's why Sam Altman is going to be bringing erotica to ChatGPT in December, because this is part of changing the dynamic and changing the mindset of people to be compliant. When you're immoral and you get caught up in immorality, you are more easily controlled. Sexually explicit chatbots are already on Grok. And so these big tech elites just see this as competition. And in effect, it's actually undermining the very fabric of society. Also, the globalists may be trying to foment more unrest in Africa. A very interesting event. Kenyan police have opened fire at Kasarani Stadium during former Prime Minister Raila Odinga's funeral, killing 4 and injuring several after the unrest erupted. Kenya should be the leader in Africa, the wealthiest country, most mineral resources and ability in its populace. It's going to be up to the next generation to see where this goes, as most of Africa is under the age of 25. A lot of people don't know that. In addition, the globalists are moving forward with a global tax scheme. President Trump actually caught it and tweeted about it, truthed about it today. I am outraged that the International Maritime Organization is voting in London this week to pass a global carbon tax. The United States will not stand for this global green new scam tax on shipping and will not adhere to it in any way, shape, or form. We will not tolerate increased prices on American consumers or the creation of a green new scam bureaucracy to spend your money on the green dreams. stand with the United States and vote no to London tomorrow. A very clear message that tariffs may follow if they don't. And that brings us to the China front. Stock market fluctuations won't stop strong measures against China, according to Scott Bessent. U.S. officials said Beijing is forcing the world to decouple from China, which would be to the communist parties and the communist countries' detriment. If we have to take strong measures against the Chinese, we won't negotiate because the stock market is going down. We will negotiate because we are doing what is best economically for the United States. Also, ASML prepared for China's grip on rare earths, CFO says. A semiconductor tool maker stated that it has inventory and alternatives for rare earth supplies, and then it's expecting a decline in its Chinese sales as the world does continue to decouple from China, and the United States ramps up rare earth mineral production and processing here at home. China's cottage industry of illicit chemical producers. China's 2019 class-wide scheduling of fentanyl analogs was meant to stem the tide of synthetic opioids. It did, but only long enough for trafficking patterns to adapt. Instead of shipping finished fentanyl, Chinese companies began exporting the precursors, reagents, and pill presses that now fuel Mexico's clandestine labs. The shift was structural. China's chemical export regime, seeking options to boost industrial output, inadvertently subsidized the very inputs that the cartels needed. And it's part of the demoralization campaign of China to take the morals out of our society and to get back at the United States and Great Britain for the Boxer Rebellion and the Opium Wars. Beijing, it seems, hopes that used car salespeople can save China's economy. To boost consumer spending and revive China's struggling economy, Beijing is targeting the used car market, a step to be sure, but far less than what is needed. That is another indicator that Chinese economy is headed downward. The FCC is moving to bar Hong Kong telecom carrier from U.S. networks. The move aims to prevent Chinese-controlled companies that pose national security risks from connecting to U.S. telecom networks. And all I have to say about that is about time. As Beijing tightens its hold on Burma, fractures emerge. The CCP has been backing airstrikes on civilians, environmentally destructive mining of heavy rare earths, and a lopsided election, which is resulting in pushback among the population in Burma, and very clearly armed pushback. Now, in addition, it's important to understand what is happening in the near term. The fourth plenum is coming up at the end of October here, and the Chinese are having an internal power struggle. We've been monitoring this. We said a long time ago that if Xi Jinping cancels a meeting with President Trump, doesn't matter the public reason given, very likely that is an indicator, a huge indicator of a Communist Party power struggle in China. And it does look like that is happening. Moving to Australia, the Aussies are going to build 4,000 missiles annually under a new U.S. partnership. Hundreds of weapons, which would start production before the end of the year, will be retained for use by the Australian Defence Force as the continued build-up in the Pacific proceeds at a feverish pace. The Trump administration expects Japan to stop importing energy from Russia, Bessent told his Japanese counterpart. Japan doesn't have plans to phase out Russian liquid natural gas, but in fact, Japan has said it needs Russian LNG for energy security. It made up 8% of its LNG imports. I suspect the United States is going to try to strike a trade deal with Japan for liquid natural gas in the near future to stabilize that situation. When we come back from the break, on the Middle East front, fragile peace appears to be falling apart.
What if I told you could convert your 401k or your IRA into gold? While your retirement is being beat up by a volatile stock market and inflation, it could instead be resting safely in physical gold at a place of your own choosing, including your own business. Look, gold has increased 50% in just the last year. Stock market, it's been nothing but a roller coaster. So protect your retirement from market chaos by calling Verity Metals today.
And we're back with the Middle East front. Earlier today, during operational activity by IDF forces, a terrorist threw an explosive device, a paratrooper reconnaissance unit and neutralize the terrorists, but it also underscores the fact that terror against Israeli defense forces is likely not to halt anytime soon. The Saudi Arabians and the UAE have warned of a collapse in the Gaza war-ending process. Arab and American sources confirm that Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Bahrain have issued a formal warning to the White House cautioning the process to end the Gaza war is on the verge of collapse due to what they describe as leniency toward Hamas's refusal to disarm. According to the Jerusalem Post, Israel has blocked the entry of a Turkish delegation that includes rescue teams and heavy machinery from entering the Gaza Strip because Hamas can immediately return the bodies of the abducted. There is no reason to allow Turkish crews into Gaza until it happens. Trump, responding to the mass killings in Gaza as a result of Hamas's retribution, said if Hamas continues to kill people in Gaza, which was not the deal, we will have no choice but to go in and kill them. Thank you for your attention to this matter. He followed up later at a press conference saying, I'm looking at what's happening. We have a commitment from them, and I assume they're going to honor that commitment. If they behave, good. If they don't behave, we'll take care of it. Asked to go into further detail, we won't go into Gaza. There are people very close that will go in. Also, the IDF has struck Hezbollah and Green Without Borders terror sites in southern Lebanon the second straight night, including a quarry used to rebuild infrastructure destroyed in past operations. So the Israelis not slowing down their operational tempo. Now moving to Afghanistan, Pakistan and Afghanistan still in conflict. But interestingly enough, the Afghanis are realizing they don't have a logistics system. And the only logistics they could possibly really tap into are from Iran or India, which would put them in almost an untenable position because they consider both of those countries full of infidels. Finally, Yemeni sources are admitting that the Houthi interior minister and brother of the group's leader were wounded in August, and also the chief of staff of the military was killed. So we reported on that back then. Now it's finally confirmed. A Sunni candidate was killed ahead of Iraq's November parliamentary elections as pressure continues to mount from the Trump administration and the West. And Iraq is coming to a decision point of whether they want to continue to be aligned with Iran or they want to actually be more aligned with the West. That brings us to the Russia front. President Trump had a phone call with Vladimir Putin earlier today. The peace process now is back in motion as Trump to meet Putin in Hungary to negotiate an end to the war in Ukraine. That meeting is expected to happen within 2 weeks or so. Trump responded to that at a press conference earlier today. Trump told Putin the end of the conflict would open up amazing opportunities for economic cooperation with Russia. A very clear and not so veiled threat to Putin that it could be the other way if he doesn't decide on peace. Here's why. China and North Korea are economically taking over eastern Russia, according to Ukraine's Foreign Intelligence Service. However, we've been reporting on this for over 10 years, that there have been huge Chinese worker forces in Siberia and other places in the east of Russia that have been sent there intentionally to take it over, and Russia's been in a very precarious position. Furthermore, Ukraine and President Trump now, Ukraine taking out key oil infrastructure in Russia, President Trump getting countries to back off buying Russian oil. The strategy is clear. You strangle Russian oil, the war comes to an end. And President Putin is coming to that very clear understanding. Also, some of the arms that he is being sent, particularly from North Korea, appear to be failing. North Korean KN-23 tactical ballistic missiles appear, half of them, to have crashed with no explanation why in the attack yesterday. Perhaps it's quality control. Furthermore, Indian refiners are preparing to cut Russian oil imports under U.S. pressure, according to Reuters. Trump claims Modi assured him India will stop buying Russian crude, but officials warn an immediate halt could spike global prices. So it'd have to be weaned off of Russian oil. Washington has linked reduced tariffs on Indian goods to a cut in Russian oil purchases. We'll see that continue to move forward. And again, that's very likely why Putin is going to come to the table here very soon. France has arrested 4 people in a probe into a suspected plot against an unnamed Russian dissident, anti-terror prosecutors said Thursday. So Russian sabotage operations continue in Europe. And that brings us to the South America front. Showing some unusual candor, President Trump, speaking earlier today from the White House Oval Office, said and confirmed reports that he had authorized the CIA to carry out covert operations inside Venezuela, citing Venezuela's facilitation of drug trafficking, as well as the claimed emptying of prisons and mental institutions by Venezuela into the United States, which is a typical communist tactic going all the way back to Vladimir Lenin. But very likely we have special forces on the ground in Venezuela and on the ground in Mexico, which means targeting packages have already been made. We know there have been drone overflights of both Venezuela and Mexico. So the question now is, will Trump launch ground attacks against these cells in the hub of Venezuela, which is the hub for Russia, China, Iran, and Muslim Brotherhood and Al-Qaeda proxies? Will Trump attack on land? And it's looking increasingly likely that the answer to that is yes within the next 90 days. That brings us to the national front. Federal grand jury just indicted John Bolton over taking classified U.S. secrets. That is going to be developing, but one of the immediate things that has come out of this is that former Vice President Mike Pence has been implicated in the DOJ's investigation of former National Security Advisor John Bolton related to Pence's framing of General Flynn to get him fired, his illegal possession of classified documents, and his role in January 6th. Bolton recently described Pence as a, quote, consistent ally, end quote, during President Trump's first term. I would agree with many people who have brought Pence to task for undermining the United States of America. And it remains to be seen how deep this rabbit hole goes. Coming to us from the Epoch Times, Antifa's violent tactics and terror, their history. It's interesting that they go through the same things we went on Patriot Radio here last week. But particularly, I want to highlight this comment in the article from Mark Bray, the author of the Anti-Fascist Handbook. Only mass anti-fascism, legal or not, can save us. He wrote on Blue Sky on social media on October 4th. In other words, he's calling for full-out revolution in the United States of America. We're going to get to that here in a second and what you can do about it. But history was made today as 2 members of North Texas Antifa have been federally indicted with federal terrorism charges over an ambush shooting on an ICE facility where an officer was shot in the neck. This is the first known time that Antifa members have been charged with providing material support for terrorism, and I suspect this is only the tip of the iceberg. Now, this No Kings 2.0 movement, because the other one fell totally flat, is going to be happening this weekend. If your church happens to, the day before, go down and pray over that land, that would be fantastic, because there is no king but Jesus. But it's important also that you educate the people in your church and in your community about what No Kings is really about. They are supported by the Communist Party USA. And yes, you can see them on there, including the Democrat Socialists of America. You can see the ACLU or the NYCLU, the ACLU of New York, 5051, and other radical organizations. Marxist and communist organizations here in the United States of America that are dedicated to the overthrow of this country. So, just to be clear, J. Michael Waller said that No Kings organizers have not denounced the socialists or communists who have endorsed these protests. So this is intentional, everyone. They are going for a color revolution. And as we reported last week, we thought that the color they had chosen for the revolution was purple. But in a phone call yesterday, they had a big argument about it and have changed the color and decided it should be yellow. The color of piss and cowardice. And we need to call them out on that, mock and ridicule them for being the little Easter chicks, the little yellow ones that you buy every year, or at least people in my family do. And call them out that they're really not wanting to save the United States. They're just trying to overthrow it. Interesting. Weekend ahead, and I hope that everybody, if that doesn't convince you that maybe this will, Hillary Clinton is now encouraging followers to join radicals nationwide. Communists will always ally with communists. Finally, some people are talking about Wikipedia and how it's turned into an engine of defamation. Larry Sanger is the co-founder of Wikipedia and coined the name Wikipedia in 2001. He established many of Wikipedia's founding policies, including the original neutrality guidelines before he left in 2002. Since then, he's become a vocal critic of Wikipedia's growing ideological bias, particularly on politically charged issues. Sanger says certain outlets are favored as sources while others are blacklisted, creating systematic distortion and exclusion of dissenting views. Most of Wikipedia's top editors are anonymous, which means that people have no legal recourse for lies or inaccuracies about them that may be published on Wikipedia's pages. In addition to that, and I know this personally, they have also censored military awards people have put up and pulled them offline, even though proof has been shown that those awards were duly awarded and noted in personnel files. In other words, they're stealing valor. Also at Wikipedia. Wonder when anybody's going to talk about that, and I hope it's very soon. ICE officials have arrested a Montenegro national identified as a criminal illegal alien who was serving as a sworn police officer in Illinois. Can you believe that? The ICE agency says the individual is now in federal custody pending removal proceedings. I suspect this isn't going to be the first. I think there's going to be more coming soon as this continues to be uncovered. I want to also weigh in here on this issue with the Pentagon and the media. Oh, the media is turning in all its credentials. Somebody called attention to what this is and what's being disrupted here. There is a big difference between an actual journalist and an intelligence agency operative disguised as a reporter. What we have failed to talk about is that many of these reporters were acting as intelligence operatives for foreign countries or for subversive organizations here in the United States of America. And Trump and Hegseth are preparing to coach America through the difference. Also, Representative Anna Paulina Luna published the documents from the Soviet Union on the JFK assassination. They have not been translated yet. We're going to keep our eyes on this as they are and let you know what is in there. President Trump has called out the Georgia 2020 election and votes being stored in Fulton County. We talked about this years ago, but finally there may be some accountability that were machines altered in Georgia. And lastly, the South is insanely rigged by Democrats to steal Republican seats in red states that vote for Trump by 40 points, according to Benny Johnson. If the Voting Rights Act is repealed, you're going to see a massive change in the U.S. back toward free and fair elections. And that is the briefing. Up next, our guest, Mark Sutherland.
What if I told you you could convert your 401k or your IRA into gold? While your retirement is being beat up by a volatile stock market and inflation, it could instead be resting safely in physical gold at a place of your own choosing, including your own business. Look, gold has increased 50% in just the last year. Stock market, it's been nothing but a roller coaster. So protect your retirement from market chaos by calling Verity Metals today.
We're back with our guest today, Mark Sutherland of the Sutherland Report, talking about the Middle East and also what's happening in England. Mark, it's always great to have you on Patriot Radio.
Good to see you, my friend. Hope you're well.
So you have spent time in Israel. You've spent time in the Middle East, but you also have friends there in Israel as well. So this peace agreement, I got to be honest, it doesn't seem like this is going to be a lasting peace. The question is, how long? And it really does seem like this will be a short-term peace, especially since Hamas isn't even abiding by the agreement.
Yes. I mean, as you referred to, I was out in Israel in May, and in fact, I will be returning again in a few weeks' time. Our dear friend John Haller is out there at the moment, and he's doing doing a tour with a group of fellow Americans, and he's out there at a very historic time. And then with other links with other people, there is deep concern about this. And then we've seen how Hamas has been behaving. Well, praise God that 20 alive hostages have been released. We can't, we mustn't move from that point. That is a real blessing, but it's 2 years, 2 years later. They could have been all released on the 8th of October, and we would have been looking at a very different situation. And then we've got dead bodies yet, Matt, still to be released.
Yeah.
There's a few that have come out, and then Hamas do what they did with those 2 young children. I'm just trying to think of their name, where that family, the 2 young children, were murdered with the mother, and they sent out a body of a Palestinian, someone who's living in Gaza, had been killed, and not one of the sadly one of the hostages or one of the military personnel that have been killed. So they're playing games, and which is just awful, because with this emotional roller coaster. And then, Matt, we've witnessed in the last couple of days where Hamas have been executing people on the streets of Gaza who they said they've taken them out because they were pushing against Hamas, etc. So that has been awful to see, because they filmed that to install fear, but also the celebrations. It's like they haven't been defeated outright. They haven't been defeated, Matt. Please tell me what you think.
Well, I'm seeing the conversation at a real surface level here in the United States when it needs to go deeper. I mean, just the chance in Gaza after the peace deal was signed that made this treaty be like Hudaybiyah. So the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, for those that don't know, was Muhammad's treaty for 10 years so he could be strong enough to finally overthrow his enemies. The only reason they make treaties is so they can regain strength, they can rearm, regroup, re-equip. The second thing was one of the leaders of Hamas says, conveniently, he's been out of the country the whole time, but he says the countdown to the next massacre of Jews has begun. They have no intention of peace. They never have, because the Quran called for war against Christians and non-Muslims. In fact, that's the very definition of jihad, according to the Reliance of the Traveler, is warfare against Christians and Jews. So this doesn't sound like this is going to last very long. This might even only last a week.
No, I hear you. And as when you raise that word jihad, and then we had that over here, we had that dreadful attack 2 weeks ago on the synagogue in Manchester, where the first name of the individual is Jihad, Al Shamri, and two he rams his car into members of that congregation of that synagogue, and three people are injured. Two people are dead, and he is trying to get into the synagogue, and brave people are holding the door to stop him. And Matt, I hate to say this on the one level, but having and I was on the march in London, as we've I think maybe you and I might have discussed this, but I was on the march in London against anti-Semitism. I was also on the march in London for Unite the Kingdom. But the march against anti-Semitism, there were 70,000 people there. Real privilege on both the marches to be there. And we went through London, and there were a number of Christians there, a number of people that are not Jewish who were there in support. Personally, I don't think there was enough people there, but 70,000 is still a lot. And people have been waiting for this awful event in Manchester to happen, because there's been this, when you've allowed marches on the streets of this country, whether that's in London and other cities around the UK, singing from the river to the sea, and globalize the intifada, and do we have to go on? Then you wonder why we have reached this point. And other people greater than me have said it, and it is true, that how we treat our Jewish citizens of any nation is the canary in the coal mine.
That's right.
Of where the country is at. And I believe that in the past, in history, that we have been blessed by having the Jewish people living in this country. Edward, as I call him, Edward Longshanks, expelled them. Oliver Cromwell then, of course, they came over in the Battle of 1066 with William the Conqueror. Edward Longshanks expels them, and then Oliver Cromwell brings them back quietly. And we have been blessed as a nation because of that. And these, the Jewish community in this country, just under maybe 300,000, but reducing, because they are, many of them are having a discussion, as it's reported. I haven't had those discussions, but it's reported in other shows, and you see other podcasts where they are saying, well, we're going to go back to Israel. We're going to take Aliyah, and we're looking at going back to Israel. There is no future for us here. And the hate on the street and the comments on the street. And where are those marches now, in the fact that they've got their peace deal, Matt? Where are they now? Where's the where are they sitting on the green grass of Harvard, etc.? Where are they going? Oh, we've got what we want. And there was a dreadful incident 2 days ago.
It was horrible.
Where a young man outside Oxford, or he goes to Oxford University, and then goes to Balliol College, and singing this rant, basically what he was saying is let's bury the Jews, 6 feet down is the interpretation of what he said. It's outrageous. This is 21, 22-year-old, that's now been arrested for that. None of these people understand history. They don't understand what has gone on as well. And of course, Matt, you and I, as Christians, and this is one of our biggest challenges, because we have a biblical worldview. And I've said it, I make no apology for this. I'm not sitting here as an eschatological expert, but we have a worldview. We do believe that we're in the end times, as the book of Revelation and others play out, as talk about, but it's not comfortable to talk about that in certain circles. But it doesn't mean that we don't push back. But more importantly, Matt, and this is my biggest personal challenge, is that it's the gospel. If people don't know Jesus as their Lord and Savior, they are not going to get through what's coming down the line, or understanding what's coming down the line. And you and I might be criticized because we talk about politics, which is a principality. We talk about our nations, the history of our nations, and the duality that has gone on. I mean, discussing your nation in regard to that, if we look at, George Washington, but we also look at his Freemasonry, there is a huge subject there. There's duality, but it's the spiritual battle that we are in. And the church over here is full of replacement theology and in many ways has failed. But then I'll just quickly finally end this bit by saying this, we've got a UK Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, who is a total joke. And then it's, we're going to recognize Palestine, we're going to recognize a two-state solution. So you're going to recognize something that doesn't exist under the Montevideo Convention of 1933 in how you define a state, right? How you define a country. You don't fit any of that. And then if we argue, we can point out historically, well, actually, when we had the mandate, we created Transjordan, which is Jordan, and that is your homeland. So, and then in recent history, the Jewish people, the Israelis, withdrew from Gaza to give them their own homeland. And within minutes, there's rockets coming over. And we can now see how that has worked out because they've built a tunnel system that's bigger than the London Underground. So I'm just painting, or the equivalent of it. I'm painting all that to say this is where we're at. We've got a prime minister that's giving away the Chagos Islands, giving our money left, right, and center. Now hit another scandal in regard to Chinese spies. When I am discussing these things with you, and I know who I'm talking to, and I know your area of expertise, my friend, the big thing that's coming up, I believe, in this country is that people are looking at Islam and they're looking at the history of Islam in a way, I believe, that they have not been looking at, and that the Overton window has moved in regard to that, and people are addressing the history, especially when you look at incredible people like Raymond Ibrahim, and I advise anyone to look up his work. It's excellent.
Fantastic. Yep.
And of course, Bill Warner as well. Totally different generation, but Bill Warner explaining about the Crusades, explaining the 512 battles that had gone on. Fantastic guy as well. But also the fact that people are suddenly educating themselves going, hold on, are you telling me it all went up to northern Spain? Yes. Now, one of the countries that's been so, to me, anti-Israel, so anti-Semitic has been Spain. So we've got to realize this whole spiritual battle, the principalities that are playing out, and that is what we are seeing. It's like I've said this to contacts in Israel. I've said, please, if you think that every single person in this country believes what Keir Starmer has done, please no. Plus, you could argue he's only just got in by claiming 20% of the votes. And in the last election, a bit complicated to try and explain how that works out. But if you say in the last election, only 40% of people didn't vote in the election, that's how bad it was. But in many ways, it's a very clever Fabian construct, because people have got so fed up with democracy, inverted commas, and then, we'll just come in and change it. We'll do things. They are liars. This country is on the border of bankruptcy. We've got, as President Trump pointed out when he was over here, the fact that we have got this oil fields in the North Sea. We're not drilling it. We're not using this at all. The net zero belief is off the charts, even though in certain academic circles, in certain journalistic circles, it's really pointing out the fact we're at the end of it. We've got solar panels on prime farmland. We've got windmills that you have to turn off because we don't have the electric grid power system, in other words, to take up the electricity supply that they are taking. And then as you have over there, whether that's Harvard, Columbia, Penn State, or maybe Penn State, maybe a little bit unfair, but other universities where people are going, we have to see it in the context in regard to the river to the sea. We have got blatant communist propaganda training
Yeah.
going on within our system. And I think I sent you a clip. I don't know if you've seen it. Do not worry, but I just want to describe something. When you suddenly realize that a vast majority of the members of a lot of the members of parliament who are supposed to represent us in Westminster, or where you are, depending on where you are in the country, you think, I'm not going to contact my member of parliament. I'm not revealing where I am. I'm not going to contact my member of parliament because suddenly I'm putting my head above the parapet. I'm then potentially, I might be talking to some, socialist, if not communist. And I'm asking you not to, in regard to a Palestinian state, it doesn't exist. This is the wrong move. And then suddenly you could find yourself on a list of, oh, we'll have to watch this person, excuse me, because we think he's far right. And we've just had that yesterday, or in the last couple of days when the program goes out, that the deputy leader of the Liberal Democrats, or maybe that was today, stands up and is having a go at Tommy Robinson, calling him a far-right racist, which he's not, and then bemoaning the fact that Elon Musk has just picked up his tab for legal fees, where the British establishment has taken him to court yet again, but taken him to court, accused him of being a terrorist, which he's not, because he refused to give them the code to his Apple iPhone. And they've said, right, well, on the 4th of November, come back and we'll sentence you. And dear Tommy, in the meantime, has flown off to Israel because he has been an invited guest by the Israeli government over there, by the minister, I think it's Chikala. I do apologize, I'm murdering the name, but that minister's job, his role, his portfolio is head of the diaspora, head of the Jews that are in the diaspora, in referring to that historical dispersal, or in other countries like over in America, around the world, and here. So Tommy's gone over here, but the language, I mean, the awful assassination of Charlie Kirk. But we look at the build up to this, the language that people are using in the public square, just as a statement.
Well, so emboldening.
Absolutely. So a reform candidate, a young guy whose name has just gone from me. Sorry, he is a councillor, one of the councillors at the age of 19, an incredible man, young man, but at that age was assaulted in the street because he's a reform candidate. Sorry, a reform councillor, and people are turning, that's Nigel Farage's party, and people are, they're calling him a fascist and all this. I mean, this is an outrage, but you're absolutely right. We've seen this, we saw this in Antifa, in BLM, in the lockdown, all the George Floyd stuff. Matt, sorry, I'll be quiet, but I'm just to give you an overview of what's going on, because it's happening over there. And just quickly, we've got a prime minister who actually, there's a picture of him giving the knee in the BLM nonsense.
Yeah. Yep. And the hypocrisy is so, I mean, it's intentional. I know it's intentional hypocrisy, but this is just so hypocritical. I mean, you have people literally being put on their knees, gunned down on camera, at least 50 people, probably way more than that. That'll come out later. Trump tweeted just now, that's what I was looking at earlier, if Hamas continues to kill people in Gaza, which was not the deal, we will have no choice but to go in and kill them. Thank you for your attention to this matter. I actually truthed that just recently. So when we come back from the break, I want to talk about the dragon in church history, and that this is going to be, according to eschatology, a battle through the end until Jesus comes back.
What if I told you could convert your 401k or your IRA into gold? While your retirement is being beat up by a volatile stock market and inflation, it could instead be resting safely in physical gold at a place of your own choosing, including your own business. Look, gold has increased 50% in just the last year. Stock market, it's been nothing but a roller coaster. So protect your retirement from market chaos by calling Verity Metals today.
We're back with our guest, Mark Sutherland, the Sutherland Report podcast, and we're talking about what's been going on in England, but also just the fact that this peace in the Middle East is very likely going to be a short-lived peace based on the rhetoric coming out of Hamas and also out of Gaza, and also the fact they're not even living up to the peace agreement, which brings us to prophetically, in church history, we've talked about this a little bit before. There was a book included in the 1611 King James Version of the Bible called Second Esdras. And it was apocrypha, so it wasn't official canon, but the church recognized that the prophecy in Second Esdras had been fulfilled, at least most of them. There's still some that have been prophesied that have not. But one of them, so this was written in about 200 AD, probably way before that, but we date it back to the earliest work being 200 AD. And it said there would be the rise of the dragon nations of Arabia. So intentionally called out the dragon nations of Arabia. And in 632, with Muhammad's death and then the spread rapidly of Islam throughout North Africa and finally ending in the Battle of Tours, France in 732, which began the Reconquista and the pushing out of the Muslims from Europe, in Western Europe. The dragon has always been the symbol of Islam in church history. So in England, you know the English flag very well, Mark, is the flag of St. George. And St. George is the saint who slayed the dragon being Islam. So that's why there's so much consternation with that flag being raised over there. But also for the last times, in the last 5 minutes that we have, it's very clear that the dragon in Revelation fights against the woman, which is Israel. We know that for a fact. The dragon fights against Israel. And so this is not a battle necessarily that ends anytime soon. But there are prophetic markers that are being fulfilled in Isaiah and Zechariah that Ashkelon and Gaza would be laid waste. And we've seen that, and that's in the context of the last times. So this battle against Islam with the church, very controversial to even bring this up. But from a prophetic standpoint, Christians for 1,400 years have understood what I am saying. And it seems like in the last 50, we have forgotten our own history.
I mean, you're making an excellent point, and I need to read that book. I haven't got round to reading it, and I need to read it because I don't want to be continuing to, trying to wake up hugely to these things. And you're right, where people have forgotten that. They've forgotten the history. It's when we look at, as I say, we look at some of our history. It's really, saying the obvious, it's really important that we do know it, but it's not taught. I mean, even if I said to you, the whole real history of the flood, of Noah's flood, is not taught properly. Genesis 6,
Yep.
Fallen angels come down to earth and have sex with human women. I have to say to you, any of your listeners, if you've never read that, please go and read it. It's in the Bible. It's Genesis 6, verses 1 to 8. I am not making any of this up. And then if you look at the flood, and then that conversation when the disciples say to Jesus, when will we know of your return? As in the days of Noah. Look at what's going on. All of this ties up, and all we have is the appointment of an Archbishop of Canterbury. Yes, incoming. I'm bound to get some exocets. Who is a woman, I disagree, who is pushing forward the wokerati agenda yet again, like the Archbishop Welby did. So it's a mess, and I know I will know 100%. People attend your church, Matt, other churches like it. They're going to hear the word of God. They're going to hear the gospel. Over here, it's a little bit difficult to work out where there is a church where you could actually go and find that.
You know, it really would. And the church has got to give the moral compass for this time regarding Islam, regarding Israel. And I think where the church has not spoken up, that vacuum has been filled by voices that are A, uneducated, B, don't know their history, and C, don't understand the times that we're in. And so even on the right, we've heard those voices. And as the church really does begin to stand up, and I think you're correct that there are some people that are standing up right now, what would be your final message in the last couple minutes that we have to the church in this time? We've got the No Kings protest coming up this weekend. What would be your message to the church?
Go and read your Bible. I'm putting myself in that as well. We have to lead by example. I have to do more of that and understand the signs of the times and what we see. And also our big challenge is, God, what do you want me to do? I'm to be about my Father's business. What do you want me to do? And if I may say, addressing your great nation, which I do love to bits. The point is that there is so much lethargy. People cannot see the danger inside America that is huge at this present time. Matt, you've been sounding the alarm, care, etc. This is real. We have to look at Dearborn, Michigan. We look at what's happening around Dallas Airport, Plano, etc. I'm not making any of this up. People start paying attention to what is going on. That's on both sides of the pond. And we have to pray. We're fighting the biggest spiritual battle of our lifetime. But it says that in the book.
It does. Mark, as always, a great conversations. Blessing to you, and keep up the fight. Mark Sutherland, the Sutherland Report podcast. Check it out. If we want to really see this turnaround, here's what you can do. Speak up in your community. Speak up in your church about the time that we're in. The communists have chosen their unity color, as we've covered earlier in the brief. And now it's up to us to mock that, ridicule it, but more importantly, stand for the truth. Be the moral compass for the nation. Be the moral compass for our community. Be the moral compass for our families. When the church speaks up, when the church stands up, the rest of the country will follow. This is Matt Shea. Thank you so much for joining me today on Patriot Radio. May God bless all of you. He is making this generation the greatest one. So keep up the fight.